Episode 29. Small Diamond. Upon hearing the gunshot from a distance, Luis and Pedro, who were nearby, immediately rushed to investigate. When they reach the area where they believe the shot came from, they find a man lying unconscious on the ground. As they hurry towards him, Luis is stunned when he recognizes the victim. It is Max. When Pedro asks if he knows the man, Luis explains that he is Max, the man who abandoned Domenica on their wedding day. Without wasting any time, Luis instructs Pedro to return to the estate and bring Prudencio along with his medical kit so they can treat him. A short while later, Max is brought to the estate and laid on a bed while Luis tends to his gunshot wound. Afterwards, Luis, Pedro, and Prudencio discuss what happened downstairs, and Pedro reveals that he had earlier seen Osvaldo secretly following Max, which he found suspicious. However, he doubts the shooting was connected to a robbery since Osvaldo already has money. Luis agrees that he doesn't believe Osvaldo is responsible either. Instead, his suspicions fall on Gennaro. When Prudencio asks why, Luis explains that Gennaro has repeatedly claimed he would do anything to protect Domenica and has openly confessed his love for her. Knowing how often Gennaro resorts to guns and violence to solve his problems, Luis believes he is more than capable of doing something like this. Luis adds that he intends to report the shooting to the authorities, although he is concerned because many people in positions of power are friends with Gennaro. Small Diamond. Meanwhile, at Gabriel's shop, Paulinho, one of Gennaro's men, informs him that Max survived the shooting but suffered a gunshot wound. He also reveals that Luis is treating him at that very moment. Gennaro immediately asks whether anyone suspects who the shooter might be. Paulinho tells him that nobody knows yet and that unless Max wakes up and remembers his attacker's face, there is no way to identify the culprit. Gennaro orders Paulinho to keep quiet and tell absolutely no one about what happened. Osvaldo, who has just served Gennaro a drink, mocks Luis for saving the life of his romantic rival. Gennaro quickly shuts him down, reminding him that Domenica has nothing to do with Max anymore. After checking on Max, Luis speaks privately with Pedro. He invites his brother to stay at the estate if he wants, assuring him that Mercedes won't be returning anytime soon. Pedro politely declines but thanks Luis for the invitation. Luis tells him that Pedro shouldn't be the one thanking him. Instead, he should be thanking Pedro for putting aside their resentment and helping him through everything. The brothers warmly embrace before Pedro leaves and Luis heads downstairs. Small Diamond. Meanwhile, at Domenica's estate, Nicole brings Domenica a cup of tea while she sits anxiously in her room trying to recalculate her financial plans. Domenica admits that she can barely concentrate. Nicole comforts her just as Domenica receives a call from Luis. Her face immediately lights up when she sees who is calling, and she answers warmly. However, her happiness quickly disappears when Luis tells her that Max is at his house. Confused, Domenica asks why, and Luis explains that Max has been shot and he is treating him. He then coldly tells her that she should come over since Max is the love of her life. Domenica asks about Max's condition, but Luis abruptly ends the call. Without hesitation, she quickly gets dressed, tells Nicole she will be back soon, and rushes out. After ending the call, Luis tells Prudencio that he doesn't want to be around when Domenica arrives because he already knows she is coming. He then leaves. However, at Chiara's house inside the community center, she and Sylvia discuss the progress of their plans. They talk about how Sylvia successfully convinced Sebastian to help them cover up the truth surrounding the diamond ring. Sylvia complains that she deserves compensation because she had to use her own body to secure Sebastian's cooperation. Chiara reassures her that once their plan succeeds and Max marries Domenica, they will both have access to Domenica's fortune. Before Sylvia can question how certain Chiara is about the plan, they suddenly hear shouting outside. Small Diamond Pedro and Nieves are arguing on the staircase, with Nieves demanding to know why Pedro fought with Osvaldo. When Chiara comes over and asks what is happening, Pedro explains that a man named Max Langer has been shot. The news leaves Chiara completely stunned. Meanwhile, Domenica arrives at the Mirador estate and meets Prudencio, immediately asking where Max is. Prudencio takes her upstairs to the room where Max is resting. When Domenica enters, she finds Max lying weakly in bed. Still unconscious, he repeatedly mumbles that it wasn't his fault, apologizes to Domenica, and calls out her name. When Domenica touches his forehead, she realizes he has a high fever. She asks Prudencio to bring some cold water and a towel so she can help lower his temperature. After Prudencio leaves, Max continues mumbling in his sleep, leaving Domenica quietly wondering who he is talking about. Small Diamond elsewhere, Luis arrives at Gabriel's house with Cosma to question Osvaldo. Gabriel calls Osvaldo over and explains that Luis wants answers because witnesses saw him following Max before the shooting and later arguing with Pedro. At first, Osvaldo tries to play innocent, but Gabriel insists that he tell them the truth. Osvaldo eventually admits that he and his friends crossed paths with Pedro and nearly got into a fight before Luis intervened. He also admits that he had been following Max but claims he only did so because he found the stranger suspicious. He strongly denies having anything to do with the shooting. After hearing his explanation, Gabriel concludes that Osvaldo's account clears him of any involvement. Small Diamond later that evening, Chiara is locking up the community center when Gennaro suddenly grabs her by the hair from behind and slams her against the door. Furious, he accuses her of playing both sides. After releasing her, Chiara thanks him for not hurting her, but Gennaro warns that unless she gives him a convincing explanation, she will regret betraying him. Chiara calmly explains that she approached Max to form an alliance with him. Her plan is for Max to win Domenica back and marry her, which would ultimately leave the farm free for Gennaro. Although her explanation makes sense, Gennaro remains furious and threatens her with his gun. Chiara refuses to be intimidated, boldly pointing out that hurting her would not benefit him in any way. Eventually, Gennaro backs down and lets her go. Meanwhile, Luis finishes questioning Osvaldo and tells Cosma that he will remain in contact before leaving. When Chiara returns home, Sylvia startles her by asking where she has been. Chiara reveals that Gennaro caught her and now knows she has secretly been working with Max. Small Diamond back at the estate, Luis returns home and finds Prudencio waiting for him. Prudencio informs him that Domenica is still upstairs taking care of Max. Luis quietly enters the room and finds Max already conscious, with Domenica helping him take his medication. Luis politely asks Max how he is feeling before excusing himself, deliberately leaving Max and Domenica alone together. Domenica immediately follows Luis, hoping to explain herself, but instead, another painful argument erupts between them. Luis insists that Domenica already revealed her true feelings when she admitted that Max once meant everything to her. Domenica desperately tries to make him understand that she is only taking care of Max out of compassion after learning that he had been shot. She firmly insists that Luis is the only man she truly loves. Domenica reminds Luis that he was the one who saved Max's life in the first place and asks why he did it. Luis explains that he saved Max because he is a doctor who took an oath to save lives, not because of any personal feelings towards him. Still deeply hurt, Luis tells Domenica that she simply refuses to admit to herself that she is still in love with Max. Domenica strongly denies it and makes it clear that what she feels for Luis is stronger than anything she has ever felt for anyone else. With tears in her eyes, she finally tells Luis that he is a coward for constantly running away whenever he is given the opportunity to stand up and fight for their love. Episode 30. Inside the room, Max secretly overhears everything between Luis and Domenica and smiles to himself. Eventually, Luis tells Domenica that he has heard enough and will give her all the space she needs before walking away. Moments later, Max accidentally falls from the bed, and the loud noise immediately brings both Domenica and Luis rushing back into the room. Together, they help Max back into bed before Luis quietly leaves once again. Later, Luis tells Prudencio that he no longer wants to stay anywhere near Max and asks him to continue taking care of him instead. When Domenica eventually comes downstairs, she angrily confronts Luis, but their tension remains unresolved, and she storms away. The following morning, Domenica remains heartbroken in bed, asking Nicole why Luis refuses to trust her or even give her the opportunity to explain herself. Meanwhile, Luis checks on Max and finds that he has recovered considerably. Before long, the two men begin arguing over Domenica. Max boldly declares that he loves her and insists that Domenica still loves him too, but Luis refuses to accept his claims. Max then repeats his version of what happened before his wedding to Domenica. According to him, dangerous men kidnapped him and demanded money before the ceremony. He claims that he paid them in order to protect Domenica and had only recently managed to rebuild his finances, which finally allowed him to return and repay everything he owed her. Luis listens silently before handing Max his medication and walking away in frustration. Back at Domenica's estate, Gennaro enters her office, where she directly questions him about Max's shooting. She asks whether he or Osvaldo knows anything about what happened, but Gennaro pretends to know absolutely nothing. Domenica orders him to send men out to search for the real shooter. She also warns him that if she ever discovers Osvaldo was involved, Osvaldo will face serious consequences, and Gennaro himself will lose his job for defending him. With that warning, Domenica walks away. Meanwhile, Sylvia meets Pedro and openly flirts with him, gently touching his chest. Nieves immediately objects, reminding Sylvia that Pedro is her boyfriend. Laughing it off, Sylvia claims she was merely giving Pedro a friendly massage before walking away. Once she is gone, Pedro reassures Nieves that she has absolutely nothing to worry about because he isn't interested in Sylvia. However, Nieves remains upset and questions why Pedro didn't stop Sylvia immediately. Just then, Adelaide arrives. Already irritated, Nieves scolds her for being late and orders her to get straight to work. Adelaide jokingly asks whether Nieves isn't even going to greet Pedro, but Nieves replies that she doesn't have to. Their disagreement quickly becomes heated, especially when Adelaide reminds Nieves that she herself once admitted Pedro liked Adelaide first. Within moments, the two women are shouting at each other before grabbing each other's hair and fighting. Pedro rushes between them to separate them but accidentally receives a blow to his forehead. Frustrated by the entire situation, he shouts at both women, grabs his hat, tells them they are fighting over something meaningless, and storms away. That same morning, San visits Sebastian for an update on the investigation into the mysterious diamond ring. Sebastian hands him a report, but San is confused to discover that it contains only one name, Aurelio Martel, with no receipt, customer information, or additional records. Sebastian apologizes and explains that it is all he has been able to uncover. San asks whether they can review the jewelry shop's CCTV footage to identify the customer, but Sebastian tells him that the recordings are automatically deleted every month, making that impossible. San later informs Olivier, the jeweler, that their only lead is the name Aurelio Martel. Olivier assures him that they will continue investigating. However, as soon as San leaves, Sebastian immediately calls Sylvia. The two flirt playfully over the phone as Sylvia reminds him to keep his promise. They also discuss meeting again while affectionately calling each other pet names. Meanwhile, Chiara visits Domenica in her office and tries to comfort her. A heartbroken Domenica admits that she and Luis have argued yet again. She confesses that she no longer knows how to convince him that she loves only him and that Max means absolutely nothing to her anymore. The next morning, Gennaro and Chiara meet in Gennaro's quarters. Gennaro tells Chiara that, once again, she has ruined one of his plans. He reminds her that he instructed her to take care of Max, yet she couldn't even accomplish that simple task. However, Gennaro says he has already handled the matter himself. He then reveals that he and Max spoke earlier about Max joining them in their plan. Max also asked Gennaro to drop him off in the capital. Chiara immediately asks what Max wants there, but Gennaro mocks her for always being the last person to know what is happening. He admits that even he doesn't know why Max wants to go to the capital, only that Max said it was urgent. Chiara then complains that Gennaro still hasn't given her the money he promised. Gennaro tells her to calm down and assures her that Max will definitely return because he cannot afford not to. As Chiara prepares to leave, saying she should probably speak with Domenica since she was the last person to see Max before his departure, Gennaro grabs her hand, pulls her back, and forcefully kisses her. Chiara immediately pushes him away, calls him an idiot, and walks off. Gennaro jokingly tells her that she is only offended because kissing her is his way of coping with losing his boss to a farmer. Meanwhile, at Bartolo's home, a seamstress takes Rosita's measurements for her confirmation dress. They joke about how quickly Rosita is growing and tease that she might no longer fit into the dress by the time it is finished. Laughing, Rosita replies that she will simply shrink herself like a little armadillo so she can wear it. As the seamstress writes down her measurements, she asks whether Rosina has decided who she wants as her godfather. Rosita smiles and says she has already chosen someone, but it is a secret. Afterwards, Chiara meets with Domenica. Domenica admits that she doesn't understand why Luis is so upset simply because she went to see Max. She then reveals something else that has been bothering her. When Max had a fever a few days earlier, he repeatedly mumbled about a woman telling him to leave her alone and not marry her. Elsewhere, Chiara is immediately startled and asks whether Domenica is certain those were Max's exact words. However, she quickly brushes the matter aside, suggesting that Max had a high fever and was probably delirious. Chiara then advises Domenica to finally make up her mind. If she truly wants Max, she should simply accept it rather than remaining confused. Domenica firmly insists that she does not want Max. Chiara replies that whatever decision she makes, she will support her. Before leaving, however, she assures Domenica that deep down, she knows Max truly loves her. Afterwards, Chiara steps aside and calls Mercedes. She apologizes for missing her and says she didn't realize Mercedes had already left town. Mercedes explains that her trip to the capital was sudden and she didn't have time to inform her. She also reveals that she and Luis had a serious argument the previous day, which influenced her decision to leave immediately. Chiara then brings up Max, surprising Mercedes, who hasn't heard anything about him. Chiara explains that Max was shot before leaving town and that Luis treated his wound. Mercedes praises her son, describing him as a man of integrity who will always help someone in need. Chiara then adds that Luis is also a man of dignity because he ended his relationship with Domenica after realizing that she truly loved Max instead of him. Mercedes feels sorry for her son and worries about how deeply the heartbreak must have affected him. She asks Chiara to look after Luis while she is away. Once again, she criticizes Domenica, saying she always knew she was a bad person. At the community center, Nieves is sweeping the hallway when she sees Adelaide arriving. She immediately remarks that Adelaide has finally shown up despite being late, hands her the broom, and tells her to quickly sweep the place. Adelaide refuses and announces that she has resigned. Nieves mocks her, pointing out how convenient it is that the moment Pedro resigns and moves back to La Abandonada, Adelaide suddenly wants to quit as well. Adelaide insists her decision has absolutely nothing to do with Pedro, but before she can finish explaining, Nieves cuts her off and warns her not to go anywhere near him. Before walking away, Adelaide tells Nieves that she isn't fighting over Pedro, but even if she were, she knows Pedro would eventually be hers. She advises Nieves to control her insecurities before Pedro becomes tired of them. Elsewhere, Luis arrives outside the office looking for Pedro. Chiara informs him that Pedro is no longer there. Surprised, Luis admits he didn't know Pedro had returned to La Abandonada because he wanted to speak with him. Chiara wonders how he hadn't heard and says she expected Domenica to have told him. Luis explains that he and Domenica haven't really had the chance to talk. Curious, Chiara asks why, and Luis reveals that he ended their relationship after realizing Domenica loves Max more than she loves him. Chiara sadly remarks that, in the end, Domenica will always return to the love of her life. She quickly apologizes, saying she doesn't mean to sound cruel, but Luis needs to accept the truth. Luis tells her it is all right and admits that perhaps he should have realized it sooner. He also mentions that his mother has traveled to the capital and hadn't expected him to remain behind because of Domenica. Chiara assures Luis that she is willing to support him in any way she can, as long as it doesn't affect her relationship with Mercedes. Luis smiles and tells her she has nothing to worry about because Mercedes genuinely likes and admires her. Although Luis admits his mother has made many mistakes throughout her life, he also acknowledges that she may have been right when she warned him against pursuing a relationship with Domenica. Chiara continues comforting him before giving him a reassuring hug. Luis thanks her and leaves. Soon afterwards, Luis arrives at La Abandonada, where Domenica warmly welcomes him, affectionately calling him "my love." She tells him how happy she is that he came because at least now they can finally talk. Luis immediately brushes her off, telling her not to waste her time because he only came to see Pedro. Domenica pleads with him to at least discuss what happened between them, but Luis coldly tells her to save her breath for her beloved when he returns. As their argument becomes increasingly heated, Gennaro steps in and glares at Luis. Sarcastically, he says that since everyone is now present, including Domenica, Luis should repeat the accusation he made earlier. Confused, Domenica asks what Gennaro is talking about. Gennaro reveals that Luis accused him of being the person who shot Max. Meanwhile, at her home in the capital, Mercedes is being lectured by Diana following an unexpected encounter with Max. Earlier, Max had arrived and introduced himself not only as the man who abandoned Domenica at the altar, but also as Martin Gonzalez, the con man who deceived Mercedes and stole her money. The moment Mercedes recognized who he was, she immediately threatened to call the police, dialing the number on her phone while also instructing Diana to do the same. Max tried to approach her, insisting that he hadn't come to hurt her and only wanted to apologize and return the money he had stolen. However, Mercedes angrily struck him in the chest, causing his gunshot wound to begin bleeding again. Episode 31. Small Diamond. Mercedes is still thinking about everything Max told her when, surprisingly, she decides to hear him out and, for a moment, actually considers his apology and his promise to repay the money he stole from her. This leads to a serious lecture from Diana, who tells Mercedes that she should at least inform the lawyer, San, or tell Luis that Max is the same man they have all been searching for. Mercedes refuses, explaining that if Luis discovers the truth, he will have Max thrown in jail, and if that happens, Domenica will eventually end up with her son. She then warns Diana that she must keep quiet about what she knows, either out of loyalty to her or for the sake of her job. Diana reminds Mercedes that she has always been loyal to her, but loyalty does not mean she will remain silent when Mercedes is making a mistake. She even reminds her of the entire mess involving Pedro and asks whether she has already forgotten the consequences of keeping such important secrets. Just then, the doorbell rings. Diana goes to answer it while Mercedes remains behind, reflecting on her words. Moments later, Diana returns and informs her that Max has come back. Max meets with Mercedes again and shows her proof of a bank transfer he has made into her account, including the interest on the money he owed her. After proving that he has returned everything, Max asks Mercedes for one thing in return: to pretend she never discovered who he really is. Small Diamond back at the abandoned house, Luis and Gennaro are still at each other's throats. Gennaro indirectly calls Luis a weak man, comparing him to himself and boasting that a real man settles his disputes physically. Luis calmly responds that all he did was report a gunshot wound. Gennaro then reveals that Osvaldo told him Luis suspected him because Pedro had apparently seen him following Max before the shooting. The revelation surprises Domenica, but before the confrontation can escalate any further, she steps between the two men and orders them to calm down. She tells Gennaro to return to whatever he had been doing. Although reluctant at first, Gennaro eventually backs down and walks away. Luis immediately points out that this is the first time Domenica hasn't defended her foreman against him. He then asks whether he can finally go and see his brother. Small Diamond before Max leaves Mercedes' house, he asks whether Diana can truly be trusted to keep their little secret. Mercedes assures him that she can, although Diana clearly isn't comfortable with the arrangement. Max eventually leaves, with Diana accompanying him to the door. Downstairs, he meets up with his friend and proudly announces that their plan has worked. However, his friend questions why Max keeps giving money away to everyone, first Chiara, now Mercedes, and reminds him that he has even promised Gennaro the farm. Max explains that keeping Mercedes on their side is important, especially considering how much she hates Domenica. As far as he is concerned, they never know when Mercedes might become useful to their plans. Regarding the farm, Max admits that he never had any intention of giving it to Gennaro and only made the promise to manipulate him. After all, Gennaro is the same man who shot him. Max vows that Gennaro will eventually get what is coming to him, but acknowledges that they must be extremely careful because Gennaro is unpredictable and dangerous. Small Diamond meanwhile, Luis meets with Pedro and tries to convince him to return home, reminding him that his place is at the Mirador estate. Pedro, however, explains that he has already made up his mind and that things are actually going well for him. He tells Luis that Domenica welcomed him with open arms, gave him a room in the mansion, and even appointed him second foreman. Luis smiles and tells Pedro that he is genuinely happy for him. Seeing how close Pedro has become to Domenica, Luis admits that he himself no longer wants to see her again. Pedro asks whether Luis is really convinced that Domenica no longer loves him. Luis replies that he is certain and painfully admits that he simply has to learn to live with it. Small Diamond the following day at the Mirador estate, Luis shares his concerns with San about finding the person responsible for his son's murder. Holding the mysterious ring between his fingertips, Luis admits that he cannot wait to finally discover who the culprit is. San tries to calm him down, reminding him that he needs to be patient and allow the investigation to take its course. He then suggests that they head into the office to review the month's accounts. As they get up, Luis absent-mindedly leaves the ring lying on the table and walks toward the office with San. However, before they can even make it inside, Adelaide welcomes Max into the house. Luis immediately confronts him, asking what he is doing there since he thought Max had already left town. Max explains that he knows Luis would never accept money from him as a gesture of gratitude for saving his life, so instead, he has brought him a radiography machine. Luis firmly refuses the gift and turns to walk away. Max tells him not to allow his pride to get the better of him, immediately provoking Luis. Furious, Luis is about to lunge at Max when San quickly restrains him and tells him to calm down. Small Diamond. Before the confrontation can go any further, Domenica suddenly arrives. She asks what is happening and immediately questions Max about what he is doing there. Luis bitterly mocks her, suggesting that she has obviously come because she wants to get back together with Max. But then Domenica's attention suddenly shifts. Her eyes move away from Luis and land on the shiny object sitting on the table. She walks over, picks up the ring and stares at it in disbelief before turning to Luis. Domenica asks him what he is doing with her engagement ring. Everyone is instantly stunned. Luis stares at her in complete shock as the meaning of her words sinks in. If the mysterious ring they have been investigating all this time belongs to Domenica, then the evidence they have been following has suddenly led directly to her. Luis then tells Domenica that if she is truly the owner of the ring, then it means she is responsible for the death of his son. Episode 32. Small Diamond. After listening to Luis accuse her of Hidunbaby's death, Domenica stared at Luis in complete disbelief and asked what he was talking about. She insisted that she had absolutely nothing to do with whatever he was accusing her of. She explained that on the day of her wedding, after Max abandoned her at the altar, she had thrown the engagement ring away in anger and heartbreak and had never seen it again until that very moment. Luis then began wondering whether one of the guests at the wedding might have picked up the ring after she threw it away. Max pointed out that they had invited countless people to the wedding, which would make it nearly impossible to identify whoever might have found it. Earlier, San had received a call from Mercedes, who informed him that she wanted to withdraw the case she had filed against Martin Gonzalez. As San questioned why she had suddenly changed her mind, Luis took the phone from him and directly asked his mother why she wanted to do such a thing. Mercedes replied that it was her decision and that she simply didn't want any more problems with the law or to become involved in a long and exhausting legal process. Luis refused to accept her explanation, insisting that they would eventually capture the con man and put him behind bars. Unfortunately, the conversation ended badly when Mercedes hung up on him. Small Diamond. Meanwhile, Chiara sat in her room repeatedly trying to call Max, but he wasn't answering. Growing worried, she told Sylvia that she wanted to know why Max had suddenly traveled to the capital in the first place. Back to the matter at hand, San wondered whether it was possible for someone else to own a diamond identical to the one in Domenica's engagement ring. Everyone immediately turned to Max, who replied that the diamond was one of a kind. Hearing this, Luis immediately lunged at him, but San quickly restrained him before things could get out of hand. Domenica tried to calm Luis down and apologized for what had happened to his late son, but she reminded him that attacking Max wouldn't solve anything or help them discover who had actually possessed the ring at the time of the murder. Furious and hurt by everything that had happened, Domenica stormed out in anger. Max stared Luis directly in the face and asked how he could look the woman he claimed to love in the eyes and accuse her of murder. He then stormed out and ran after Domenica, who immediately demanded that he leave her alone. Max tried talking to her and begged her to give him another chance, but Domenica told him there was no point. He had been given countless opportunities to do the right thing in the past, yet he hadn't taken any of them. Max argued that this was exactly why he was trying so hard to make amends now, but Domenica firmly told him that if he truly loved or cared about her, then he should let her be. With that, she walked away. Small Diamond, however, back inside, San advised Luis to travel to the capital and confront his mother about why she had suddenly decided to withdraw the case against the con man. Luis looked at him and reminded him that he had already promised to put that man behind bars. He instructed San not to give up on the case until they had accomplished exactly that. Back at home, Chiara suggested that Domenica travel back to the capital for a while to get away from everything happening around her. Nicole agreed, telling Domenica that Chiara was right and that she should seriously consider leaving for some time. She explained that it would give Luis the opportunity to deal with his own issues while Max also sorted himself out. Perhaps, while Domenica was away, Luis might even realize how much he missed her and come looking for her. Domenica replied that Luis's pride would never allow him to reach out first. Nicole responded that if that was the case, then he should suffer the consequences and discover what it truly felt like to be without her while both men remained far away. Small Diamond later, Chiara and Ernesto had another confrontation after Chiara had previously ruined his date with Blanca. Standing before him, she warned him never to compare her with Blanca. Ernesto replied that she was absolutely right because Blanca was prettier, more intelligent, and more sensitive than she was. If he truly compared the two of them, Chiara would lose. Furious, Chiara snapped back that this was exactly why she had never been interested in him. She mocked him for being boring and shy, telling him to stay with his needy country girl and see whether he wouldn't fall asleep while making love to her. She then stormed away but stopped when Ernesto called after her. Ernesto told her that he hoped everything she had just said was merely coming from her wounded ego because he had always considered her a good person. However, if what she had done the other day, together with everything she had just said, truly reflected the kind of person she was, then he wanted absolutely nothing more to do with her. He then walked away. Small Diamond. A while later, Ernesto arrived at City Hall looking for Blanca, only to find her kissing San. His sudden appearance caused them to pull apart. Ernesto apologized for interrupting him, but San smugly assured him that there was no need to worry because they would simply continue where they had left off once he was gone. Meanwhile, Max arrived at the abandoned house and was about to enter through the front door when Gennaro stopped him. Welcoming him, Gennaro immediately demanded an explanation as to why he had suddenly traveled to the capital. Max told him not to worry about it and attempted to head inside, but Gennaro grabbed his arm and asked him again. Max told him to let go because he had come to see Domenica. He casually explained that he had traveled to the capital to speak with one of their partners regarding their plan. Gennaro remarked that he hadn't realized they had other partners involved in the scheme and assumed there would be a huge payout once everything succeeded. Max assured him that there would be before attempting to enter the house again. Once more, however, Gennaro stopped him, insisting that he reveal who this mysterious partner was. Small Diamond. At that moment, Chiara walked outside and greeted both men. Max, already losing patience with the conversation, announced that he had come to see Domenica. Chiara then explained the suggestion she and Nicole had made about convincing Domenica to travel back to the capital for a while. Just then, Gennaro spotted Domenica approaching. He immediately pulled out his gun and pretended he was about to shoot Max in the foot while demanding to know why he had come there. Domenica quickly ordered Gennaro to stand down. Inside her office, Max claimed that he wanted to help Domenica discover who had really taken the ring so that her name could finally be cleared. Domenica made it perfectly clear that she wouldn't fall for any of his tricks or manipulations. Meanwhile, inside Gennaro's quarters, Chiara questioned why he was pacing back and forth. Gennaro admitted that he couldn't stand the thought of Max being alone with Domenica and that it made his blood boil. Annoyed, Chiara asked what exactly was so special about Domenica. Gennaro replied that simply thinking about her made him want to become a better man, unlike Chiara. Enraged by his words, Chiara slapped him and stormed away. Gennaro called after her, saying she could be as angry as she wanted, but she still wouldn't be able to get her cousin out of there. Chiara turned around and angrily declared that she was far more of a woman than Domenica would ever be. Small Diamond back in the office, Max brought up the kiss he and Domenica had shared, claiming that it was a sign that they had always been meant for each other and were truly soulmates. Domenica immediately disagreed. She told him they were not soulmates and never could be. Yes, they might have had a few things in common, but that kiss only proved to her that they were never meant to be together. He had abandoned her when she needed him the most, whereas she would never have done the same thing to him. Even if someone had threatened her, she would have told him the truth because she knew that she would have followed him no matter what happened. Meanwhile, towards the end of the episode, Luis and Domenica unexpectedly meet again in Mexico City while Luis is stalking Domenica because he believes she is booking a hotel where she intends to stay with Max. However, despite all the accusations, jealousy, misunderstandings, and hurt between them, the confrontation takes a completely different turn and they somehow manage to make up. Domenica finally makes her feelings perfectly clear to Luis, assuring him that Max is no longer the man she wants and that Luis is the only man in her mind, body, and soul. Episode 33. Small Diamond. Luis and Domenica relax together in the house they bought, sipping champagne as they happily discuss their future and their wedding plans. They have already decided that they will soon announce their marriage to everyone. Although a few people already know about their engagement, they want to make things official. Sitting closely together on the couch, they enjoy their champagne while exchanging loving words about the life they are preparing to build together. Small Diamond. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Max confronts Mercedes after she reveals that Luis and Domenica are planning to get married. Furious, Max lashes out at her, demanding to know why she didn't tell him sooner, especially now that the couple is no longer around. Mercedes defends herself, reminding him that she tried calling several times and that if he had bothered to answer his phone, he would have known much earlier. She insists that his only concern now should be finding a way to separate Luis and Domenica because she is determined to protect her son from the relationship. Mercedes even threatens Max, reminding him that if he fails to do what she wants, she can always report him as the con man who stole her money. However, Max coldly tells her that he no longer cares. If he cannot have Domenica, then losing everything means nothing to him, and he has no interest in continuing to help Mercedes with her plans either. Just then, Max and Mercedes notice several workers passing nearby. Realizing that their conversation could easily be overheard, Max suggests they continue talking inside, away from the employees' curious eyes. Please follow this R-Page Novellas Plus hub for more daily updates on your favorite telenovelas. Smile. Small Diamond. Elsewhere, at Gabriel's restaurant, Blanca meets San for lunch. As promised, San has agreed to offer her some legal advice. Blanca jokingly points out that it isn't every day one finds a lawyer willing to give free legal advice and tells him how much she appreciates his kindness. She then takes out a brown envelope and hands it to him. San opens it and carefully begins reading through the documents inside. Almost immediately, his expression changes, causing Blanca to become worried. Thinking something is wrong, she asks what he has discovered. San looks at her and reveals something completely unexpected. The document isn't the deed to her mother's house at all. It is actually the original deed to the Montero family's property, the very document that determines the rightful ownership of the land near the lagoon that has been disputed between Domenica and Luis. Small Diamond, after returning from their trip to the capital, where they originally intended to file an appeal, Domenica and Luis realize that they have returned with something far more valuable than any legal victory. During their time away, they were finally able to speak honestly about everything that had happened between them, resolve the differences, and make peace with one another. More importantly, they came to understand that their love was far more important than all the misunderstandings and problems that had threatened to keep them apart. Small Diamond. When Luis and Domenica finally arrive home, everyone warmly welcomes them back and expresses how happy they are to see the couple together again. Shortly afterwards, Luis and Domenica share their exciting news with everyone: they have officially decided to get married. Nicolasa is absolutely overjoyed by the announcement, and the others happily congratulate the couple as they celebrate the decision. However, there are two people who certainly aren't celebrating inside: Chiara and Gennaro. Although both of them force polite smiles and pretend to be happy for Luis and Domenica, the disappointment written across their faces makes it obvious just how unhappy they truly are about the engagement.